when you have for the first time in front of you this 3.1 billion letter instruction book that conveys all kinds of information and all kinds of mystery about humankind, you can't survey that going through page after page without a sense of awe. I can't help but look at those pages and have a vague sense that this is giving me a glimpse of God's mind. Francis Collins, The Language of God, director of the U.S. National Human Genome Research Institute. Chapter 3. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. Genesis 1:14-19. The fact that everything in the universe is set into place goes back to what we said about feng shui, and is exactly what is proven by every scientific discipline ever studied in all the experiments and observations ever recorded. Feng shui involves the use of geographical, psychological, philosophical, mathematical, aesthetic, and astrological concepts in relation to space and energy flow. It is not simply a decorating style, but a discipline with guidelines compatible with many different techniques of architectural planning. Every individual, everything, no matter what level of organization, exists in homeostatic balance with its environment. Certain things of particular shape, color, and size populate certain areas of the room, Earth. Place them in an environment where they were not meant to be, and they either destroy the already present organisms and environment, or it is itself destroyed by the conditions of the environment in which it is newly placed. The same can be said on cultural and information levels as well. An architect designs the building for its inhabitants and must fit within the parameters of its surrounding landscape, and is planned and designed well before it is constructed. The universe and everything in it is ruled by this principle, a fact any scientific discipline cannot deny, yet it requires the forethought of a designer. Refer back to our definition of creation by design in the introduction. Again, you might be thinking that there can be no direct laboratory evidence of these creation events. In reality, they are experienced in the laboratory of life all around you. But, as I will show, there are proven links, scientifically studied in the field of psychology, and that the creation of the sun is reproducible on a miniature scale in a real, as you might feel, science lab. But let's recap before we begin. The simplicity of creation rests on the following mechanisms. 1. The embeddability and recursiveness of harmonic wave patterns based on sound. 2. The electromotive force of light as a single all-encompassing sine wave comprising all frequency from 0 to infinity hertz. 3. Phi, Penrose tilings, and L systems is the mathematics behind every event of each new day. 4. A 7-day Koch curve is the embodiment of all creation, and everything in it is a replication of the iterated subset replacement, spoken command, ad infinitum. The zodiac, the Star of Bethlehem, and the birth of the King, Jesus Christ. According to John Addy, an English astrologer, the universe is a pulsating and constantly moving entity that responds to cyclic influence. This is obviously coherent with the mathematics discussed in the previous section. According to Addy, various zodiac sign influences ebb and flow in intensity, which is further coherent with our hypothesis that everything existent is based on harmonic wave patterns. And God said, this wave pattern of zodiac sign regularities is likewise termed harmonics. A day's harmonics rests in the 6th harmonic, 6 sign waves, wherein the peaks would correspond to odd signs of the zodiac and trough of the wave to even signs. This is complementary in the fact that this divides the wave in half, wherein the sun would rule over the day signs and the moon will rule over an equal number of night signs. ergo the iterated subset replacement of this day's command from God's voice. The lights in the firmament will divide the day from the night, and some will be ruled by the sun, and some to be ruled by the moon. In John Addy's theory, the peaking of primary harmonies in Leo may partly produce its distinct nature, male polarity, fixed quality, and fire element. This particular combination of culminating waves occurs only at one place in the zodiac. Likewise, a different combination of waves culminates in each of the 12 signs. In theory, these waves combine with smaller harmonies, traits related to the planetary lords of the signs and exaltation planets, and effects of the actual stars and constellations. The result is 12 complete, though varied by degree, signs of the zodiac. As you can see in the chart, the movements of the zodiac. A constellation or a simple grouping of multiple stars travel across the globe in the manner of sine waves of varying amplitudes and frequencies. The vertical lines correspond to the highest and lowest points of the wave. Constellations, hence the zodiac. 88, in all today, exists only in the minds of humans. Astronomy, taken from the Greek, literally means star measurement, distribution, or arrangement. Astrology, also from the Greek, means star knowledge or science, or knowledge from the stars. Obviously, since all of the constellations cross the Earth in this same manner, this is no accident or a highly ordered resulting pattern of some random event. This was set into place for a purpose. The lights in the firmament are there for the purpose of signs, navigation, and for seasons, 12 months. 12 zodiac signs. And for days, each zodiac sign is separated by 30 degrees, equals 30 days, equals 1 month, equals lunar cycle, and for years a multiple year calculation is an age. Because of a movement called the precession of the equinoxes, the point in the sky where the sun is at the beginning of each spring moves approximately 1 degree every 71.6 years. From the time of the Babylonians, the beginning of Jewish written tradition, to Christ was approximately 1 age, and from Christ to present has been the current age we have lived in. But the next age we will be entering into will be that of Aquarius. Approximately every 2,250 years, the marking of the equinox changes zodiac signs. There are no rigid lines of demarcation, but the descendant wave of one age overlaps the ascendant wave of another. Have you ever seen the Broadway musical Hair? Maybe not, but you have heard the chart-topping music Aquarius and Let the Sunshine In from the 60s. Why do you think they are still known today, 40 years later, and still are great songs to listen to? This is why there is a New Age movement. Their whole view is forward-looking to a dawn of a utopian world. Those who continue to be ruled by the descendancy of the past age will become more warlike, more aggressive, essentially more evil compared to the ascendancy of the New Age, wherein is promised certain utopia. This is exactly what John's revelation in Christianity is all about, the transition from the tribulation to the coming of Christ and the rule of heaven on earth in his kingdom for 1,000 years, the ascendancy of the sine wave of Aquarius. There are too many implications to go into here, but I want to try to validate these implications scientifically. This can be validated through the sciences of psychology and philosophy. Each age has a distinctive flavor or tone of philosophy, and images of common usage that mirror images connected to the sign naming the age. From a religious perspective, Christianity has come to be the flag-bearer of the Piscean age, complete with all Piscean attitudes and characteristics. Judaism was the flag-bearer of the Aries age, as was Hinduism the flag-bearer of the Taurus age. Interestingly, the Brahmin's sacred cow, Taurus image, the bull, became the golden calf that was cast down by the Judaic nomads and shepherds, Aries image, the ram. Likewise, the sacrificial lamb, Aries image, was offered and became the Christos, Christ, Savior, Piscean image, to promote the universal God concept. The imagery of the fisherman of men is also strongly Piscean. A view of deity in the Aquarian age might be a multifarious, multidimensional manifestation of the One, no longer cultural, no longer personified, but integrated into all of humanity at once, i.e., finally taking the Christ off of the cross, the image of actually sacrificing the sacrifice and placing him in the very essence of all beings. The Bible tells that Christ came into the world when it was experiencing a time of great suffering, the trough of the wave of Aries' age, the lowest point being the crucifixion of Christ. Yet, the resurrection would become the ascendant of the Piscine age, wherein the first 1,000 years would have been the establishment of all the Christian kingdoms of the known world. The descendant of the Piscine age would have begun with the age of the revolutions, with the advent of Marxism, and continue until now when we are at the beginning of sorrows, the trough of the Piscine age, the events of which Christ in Revelation of John foretold. The ascendancy of Aquarius will be the 1,000-year reign of the kingdom on the earth. The most amazing part of all this is that it all ties together in knowing that the stars were set into place to be signs for this very purpose, to navigate, mark, and track all history. Is this still only appearance of design and not actually design itself, Mr. Dawkins? I am by no means promoting New Age religion here, but the connection of psychology and sociology and philosophy need to be made and made to be obvious as original governance created by God for the social, philosophical, and psychological governance of all creation. Not to get too far ahead of myself, but the fall of Adam and Eve was an historical turning point as far as creation goes, and the implications are becoming more and more obvious as to how they relate to order as it stands today after that event. There is more here than hokey-pokey religion and New Age mysticism. There is science and order here in these connections that can likewise be mathematically proven, but not by me, and not in this paper. This is further proven by Carl Jung himself. Some of the Jungian principles reflected in astrology are the concepts of synchronicity, archetypes, and the psychological types. If you think about it, the order of the sciences of the mind, not the brain, would begin with astrology, then philosophy, then psychology, then sociology, wherein spirituality can be seen as the base and also the transcendent, which encompasses all of these disciplines. Further, the implication can be made that going from the basest of all religious practice, the beginning of the Taurus age, to the most ascendant of all religious practice, at the pinnacle of Piscine age, you would find Christianity at the pinnacle, and hedonism, barbarism, and atheism at its base. The domain of the natural sciences is a purely cause and effect relational worldview. Jung in 1952 published Synchronicity as the Principle of Acausal Connections. This concept of synchronicity goes beyond cause and effect. Events happening at the same time, i.e., being born under a certain point of the waves of the zodiac, do not need to be related by cause and effect in order to be connected. In psychological types, Jung states, the individual disposition is already a factor in childhood. It is innate and not acquired in the course of life. That is not to say that there are not other important environmental influences, feng shui, that likewise influence certain behaviors as well. Nutrition being a great example of this. Think back to creation and purpose of plants. The positions of the heavens at a particular moment in time, by reflecting the qualities of that moment, also reflect the qualities of anything born at that moment. One does not cause the other. They are synchronous and mirror each other. What is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below, so that the miracle of the one may be accomplished. Interestingly enough as this may be, it becomes even more so as we tie in the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Now you might be thinking to yourself, what does all this have to do with layer upon layer, and the plants that came before day 4, and all the insects, animals, and people that will come after day 4? That is a very good question, and I am glad you asked. But let's look at a few other unanswerable questions. Why are there so many different kinds of people with different colors and bone structures? Why are they regionalized? Why isn't all the diversity spread equally randomly over the whole earth? This will become particularly clear in a moment. How is it that animals are able to migrate to the exact location of their birth every year to spawn and reproduce? Why do animals seem to instinctually know what routes to follow for their migrations? What we have established is that everything that is created is based on sound. Secondly, different hertz levels reveal different aspects of those waves that eventually become incarnate or manifested. As we have shown here, the movement of the lights in the firmament across the Earth ebb and flow at different frequencies and amplitudes. This will give off different Hertzian manifestations, which from the combinations of these frequencies, as they hit certain regions of the Earth with respect of the magnetic fields of the rotating planets, will be manifested as similarities of that region. This effectively alters what is heard by the various life forms of the Earth. With each new life form, from vegetation to insects to animals to humans, these patterns are incorporated with greater complexity. Not only will these waves affect physical manifestations, but also will affect psychological manifestations, such as personality, behavior, culture, traditions, etc. Today, this is all rooted in astrology, a philosophic and metaphysical science. More precisely, though, this was created by God on the fourth day of creation, and after all these years has failed to be understood in its true light and for its true value to mankind. What I am speaking of can be backed up with psychology and such, but what about a true laboratory science like chemistry or physics? What about some mathematics for all this as well? We have already discussed the correlations and mathematical relationships of how color is as well a sound outside of our hearing range, even though we can transpose the frequency to within our aural range. At any given moment, an exact and calculable band of energies, light, from a host of different stars is being received by any life form being born at any point on Earth. Does the time of day matter? Yes. Does the place on the map matter? Yes. The existence of these bands of energies can be explained by atomic physics and quantum mechanics. All of this can be examined far more deeply than what I will provide in this paper. But hence the color of plants, the size, the shape, the type of fruit, etc., that we see grouped in specific and various regions of the world. If the only energy that any life on Earth heard came only from our sun, then there would be no diversity. Everything would have the same color and makeup as everything else, more on the sun later. In my own experience, I have noticed that when I move to a different region of the country, I seem to fit in better than others. This could also indicate why, as so many people moved into the great melting pot of America, forming groups like migrating birds that flock together to recreate their left-behind home regions. But enough on that. I need to further prove this phenomenon of the lights in the firmament with mathematics and geometry. To do this, I need to introduce you to what is called natal charts. Natal simply means of, or associated with the time and place of one's birth. A natal chart shows the exact position of the planets and their position against the backdrop of astrological groupings in the universe, i.e., the zodiac. A natal chart is another name for the astrological birth chart. It is the unique astrological chart specific to an individual's birth that shows the positions of the sun, ascendant, moon, lunar nodes, and all of the other planets in our solar system as viewed from our geocentric position here on Earth. In addition to the date of birth, an accurate birth time, the first breath is generally agreed upon as the exact time when the chart should be calculated, is very important when setting up a natal chart in order that the primary angles of the chart may be calculated with extreme accuracy. In addition to an accurate birth time, the astrologer must also have the place of birth as well, for the latitude and longitude of the location of the birth is necessary in order to set up a fully accurate natal chart. The natal astrological chart is the basis of legitimate astrology, and that is why many serious professional astrologers have such a problem accepting the mass market, overly simplified and dumbed-down 12 sun sign system found in many newspapers and magazines across the globe. Professional astrologers tend to dislike sun sign astrology because it creates a misconception of the science of the stars, i.e., the misconception that astrology is entirely about sun signs, and because its inaccuracy leads most non-astrologers to reject all legitimate forms of astrology as untrue. Everyone's natal chart is different and unique, depending on the date, exact time, and precise location of the birth. Even a pair of twins' birth charts are sometimes slightly different because one of the twins is usually born a few minutes or even more before the other one, because the planets and primary angles in the sky are moving every second relative to Earth. As each second passes, the astrological chart is changing, shifting very slightly no matter where you are on the planet. The receiver does not need a precise clock, but does need a clock with good short-term stability and the ability to receive signals from 4 satellites in order to determine its own latitude, longitude, elevation, and the precise time. The receiver computes the distance to each of the 4 satellites from the difference between local time and the time the satellite signals were sent. This distance is called a pseudo-range. It then decodes the satellite's locations from their radio signals and an internal database. The receiver should now be located at the intersection of 4 spheres. Different satellites use different sequences, which lets them all broadcast on the same frequencies while still allowing receivers to distinguish between satellites. I know that is a lot of technical information, but let me try to simplify this and reconcile it to what God created in the firmament. The universal geocentric location and awareness system, the lights within the firmament, is a physical and spiritual navigation system for determining one's precise location and providing a highly accurate reference anywhere on Earth or in the universe. It is a hyperplanetary, outside our solar system, satellite system consisting of 70 sextillion, as of 2003, stars grouped into 12 houses called the zodiac. The satellites carry cyclic clocks and constantly broadcast precise time according to their own clock, along with administrative information, iterated subset replacement from God, including the elements of their own motion and frequencies, as determined by a set of ground-based observatories. The life form does not need precise technical knowledge, but will need precise technical equipment, given standard upon birth, and also the ability to receive. Different satellites send different sequences, which allow all the stars within the 12 satellites to broadcast on the same frequencies while allowing receivers to distinguish between stars. This system of navigation did not happen by some arbitrary event as the Big Bang, and just happened to be there in those positions. Further, just by accident, all the groupings move cyclically in a sine wave pattern across the globe. These were precisely engineered for a purpose and set in a precise location to give light upon the Earth. Want to understand the inner workings of a killer or a terrorist or a rapist? I suggest looking at their natal chart. Want to understand the workings of the universe? Then I suggest sitting down with an astrologer and pinpointing direct geometric and mathematical precision and nailing down the pattern of our creation so that we can better understand our own selves and how those patterns can help us to live in harmony and peace with each other and creation. How can we understand hypothetical wormholes and tunnels and time warps and aliens, which we cannot see or experience, when we can't even understand why we are killing each other, which we experience daily? You might be thinking that nobody can know the universe in that way. Nobody can track and map the stars in such a manner and relate them to events and happenings on Earth. There is recorded an event that would change all of history as we know it. This event is not only recorded in the Holy Bible, but in many other texts also. This event is likewise recorded in the heavens by the stars themselves. The group of people who had mastered the science of astrology was known as Magi. At least by 1000 BC, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and what is southern Yemen were part of a large empire known as the Sabaean Kingdoms. The earliest known Arabian temple was at Marib, in southern Yemen, capital of Saba, and was called Maram Bilqus, precincts of the Queen of Saba. The Arabs called this woman Bilqus or Balkis. In Ethiopia, Makeda, also Magda, Makda, and Makera, meaning greatness. Saba, Sheba, was a center of astronomical wisdom. In Saba, Sheba, the queen or king, was the chief astronomer and astrologer. Spiritual religious life involved reverence of celestial bodies such as the sun and moon. Another moon goddess worshipped by the Sabaeans was Astarte, or Ashtar, whom they call Astar, which means womb. The giver and destroyer of life, Astar was queen of heaven and mother of all deities. After the study of astronomy was set on foot for the use for navigation, and the Egyptians, by the helical risings and settings of the stars, had determined the length of the solar year of 365 days, and by other observations had fixed the solstices and formed the fixed stars into asterisms, all which was done in the reigns of Amun, Sesak, Horus, and Memnon, 1,000 years before Christ. It may be presumed that they continued to observe the motions of the planets, for they called them after the names of their gods. By the assistance of Cyrus, a priest of Egypt, they invented astrology, grounding it upon the aspects of the planets and upon the qualities of the divinities to whom they were dedicated. Astrology was propagated thence into it. Chaldea, where Zoroaster, the legislator of the Magi, met with it. The following quotation is from the ancient universal history. In the reign of Gushtasp, king of Persia, flourished a celebrated astrologer whose name was Jamasp, surnamed Al-Hakim, or the Wise. He was the brother of King and his confidant and chief minister. He is said to have predicted the coming of the Messiah. Jamasp is the author of a treatise entitled Judicia Jamaspis, in which is contained his judgment on the planetary conjunctions. Therein he gave notice that the Christ should appear. In the sphere of Persia, saith Aben Ezra, there arises upon the face of Virgo a beautiful maiden. She is holding 2 ears of corn in her hand and a child in her arm. She brings up a child in a place which is called Abri, the Hebrew land, and the child's name is called Isi, Jesus. Jamasp, it is said, was without a peer in his understanding of the ways of astrology, and enjoyed the company of 9 other Persian doctors, of such consummate wisdom as the whole world could not boast. What it is that these 10 Persian wise men knew has not yet penetrated the paradigm of Western man. Jesus Christ had a natal chart, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, and she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. The woman that pained to be delivered was what the Magi looked for, and to them her name was Aster, a star. As a matter of fact, these were not Jews, Hebrews originally, Jews at the time of Christ's birth, who were looking for this star, but they were Arabs. The star that they were looking for wasn't a lone anomaly, a twinkle twinkle little star out there in space somewhere. They were looking for a specific event to happen in which all the stars and planets would align in a specific formation. The fact that John's revelation fully describes this event as a great wonder appearing in heaven signifies how truly awesome this is. The wonder that had been looked for by many civilizations for thousands of years and was prophesied to come through the seed of David, out of the lineage of Abraham, was the configuration of the planets within the zodiac to create the 6-pointed star and the Grand Cross. The reason that it is such a great wonder was not because of its significance to the whole world that had been looking for it, but because there is only one opportunity of this ever happening. Likewise, there are, as we know today, at least 70 million sextillion stars contained in those 12 zodiac houses, all aligned perfectly to signify this event. The event only has a chance of happening once every 40 million years. Yet, each age of the zodiac only lasts approximately 2,250 years, times 12 signs equals a total of only 27,000 years per cycle. Ultimately, we understand that all the stars send frequencies that affect our spiritual, emotional, and psychological makeup. This is no different for Christ at his birth. The difference for him is that every single star in the universe would have sent all frequencies with a full endowment. This is the only way possible for every energy from all of creation to be placed out of the universe and into flesh. Hence, the description of Christ being the Word in John chapter 1 of the Holy Bible and 1 John chapter 1. This was the transmittance of the Word, light, from day 2 of creation, upon which everything was created into the natural realm of mankind. Further, if you take 3 planes and intersect them in the X, Y, and Z axis, the front face of these intersecting planes create a 6-pointed star. At the very center of these intersecting planes, a sphere will be created, a sphere that held all the energy of the whole universe. Later on in this section, you will see how these energies from the star created our own sun. But here, in the midst of space, in this zodiacal configuration, at the center of the Grand Cross, there would have been a certain glow, a temporary star that would have not been there before. Hard to believe? I suggest studying sympathetic vibratory physics, the science of a man named John W. Keely, for information on how this is possible. This ultimately is the manifestation that the Magi followed directly to the place of where Jesus was laid in a manger and would have stood directly over that house. This was a one-shot to get it right. This proves the reason for the stars to be set in the firmament on day 4 instead of some random event. They had to be set with such forward-looking accuracy and calculation to pass through Taurus, Aries, and Pisces a little over 6,000 years BC before coming to the appointed time when Christ should appear. That time, the birth of Christ, is recorded in the heavens as March 2nd, 5 BC, an offset of the Gregorian calendar reconciled by the usage of pi, calculated by John Charles Webb, Jr., 9 hours, 14 minutes, and 28 seconds, A.M., Bethlehem. If you read the account of generations in Matthew, there are 3 sets of generations before Christ consisting of 14 generations each. This means that the end of the 6th day of creation, in which God formed Adam and Eve, was the end of the Gemini age and the beginning of the Taurus age. The significance and the power of this event cannot be understated. Let's take a side journey here for a second while pointing out that everything is based on frequency and pitch, etc. Each of the individual stars in the firmament was given a certain frequency which they would send to the Earth. The planets are reflectors of these energies. Also, their orbits and their construction create magnetic fields, which are extraterrestrial, not on Earth, while the Earth generates its own magnetic field, which pushes outward into space. I believe that the interaction of the electric energies coming from this star configuration would have created a sort of glow, which would have only been to those who were looking for it at that time by the Magi. Today, perhaps not understanding these events, we see them as apparitions, ghosts, etc. Simply, they are electrical energies trapped in magnetic fields. Such events in physics are termed Hutchison effects, because a man named John Hutchison is able to reproduce these events using electrical equipment, but there is no accepted scientific explanation so far. The Hutchison effect, Chukhanov, and the sun. The term Hutchison effect applies to all the unexplainable phenomena that his machinery can produce. Some of the effects that John Hutchison has been able to produce from his various machinery include the continued levitation of objects: wood, styrofoam, plastic, copper, zinc. They can hover and move about, swirl around and ascend, or shoot off at fantastic speeds. Spontaneous combustion of materials that don't normally burn, like cement and rock. Mirrors smash at great distances away. Metal is able to bend and warp and even break by sliding sideways. Water spontaneously swirls in vortexes. Metal can become white-hot, but not burn surrounding materials. Lights can be seen to form in mid-air of different colors. Grayish-type mists have been seen to form. In other tests, objects have appeared that had a cling of gray fog, moving about the room, all of which have been clearly filmed on 8mm film. You might think that all this was done in a sophisticated laboratory, and that John Hutchison is a top scientist at NASA or Lockheed Martin. The truth is, he is self-taught, and all of this has been experienced in his overcrowded apartment in Canada, with no more power than comes from a common light socket. But think in your mind of all the unexplained phenomenon over the history of the world, reports of UFOs and unexplained lights in the sky, the fogs and disappearances of the Bermuda Triangle, sudden and unforecasted storms, ghosts and apparitions, etc. These all sound too similar to Hutchison effects to be coincidence and can now be explained by the interactions of electric and magnetic fields. How about another unexplainable phenomenon, the overshadowing of Mary in the scriptures? This event could have been caused by an inception of energy in her womb that created a life form that would become the Christ, further enabling his title as anointed with light. John Hutchison says of the Bermuda Triangle, "It is highly probable that nature can form these fields on her own and create the right situation for the ship or aircraft to either totally disintegrate or disappear into another dimension or domain." Then is it not possible that the reverse could be true? That from the interaction of these energy fields, things from another domain, the spiritual, could appear in our physical realm? Yes, of course it is. See laws of thermodynamics. A long time ago, biologist Ivan Sanderson noted that the greatest number of disappearances in the world occurred in specific locales, vortices he called them, which lie on the right or east sides of the continents, and all precisely in curious areas where hot surface currents stream out of the tropical latitudes toward the colder waters of the temperate. He explains this is of enormous significance because these are the areas of extreme temperature variabilities, which alone would predicate a very high incidence of violent marine and aerial disturbances. What more likely areas, he continues, for storms and wrecks and founderings and even magnetic anomalies? He went on to ask whether these vast natural machines generate still another kind of anomaly that might cause something to go wrong in our space-time continuum. In other words, could they create vortices into and out of which material objects can drop into or out of other space-time continua? Hutchison's studies may not prove this, of course, but continuing results prove the unlimited potential of electromagnetism on matter. Something more interesting to be reported of these Hutchison effects is that of spontaneous invisibility of materials like metal and wood in the active zone of the interacting fields of magnetism and energy. Likewise, spontaneous visibility of objects with a grayish cloud enveloping them has also been observed. Further, John Hutchison isn't the only one to see these effects. Richard Hull also observed these effects with a Farnsworth fusion machine in the 1930s. Farnsworth was the inventor of the television. Let's look at something else here as well: weather patterns and cloud formation. It is believed that cloud formation comes from the evaporation of surface water into the air, and as it carries high, enough is mixed with dust particles, and the water drops begin to cool and form clouds. This photo is an X-ray picture of the sun. The darkest lines you see traveling across its face are lines of greatest activity. This is very similar to the dots you see above on the Earth of greatest phenomena activity. Is this mere coincidence? I seriously doubt it. Let's try and figure out how these two patterns from the sun and from the Earth are connected. Charge is caused when there is an excess or deficit of electrons in one system compared to another system. An electric field is caused by multiple charges in a given system. A field can be positive or negative, or have regions of positive and negative charges in the same system. Opposites attract and likes repel. If there is a positive electric field and a negative electric field nearby, the negative electric field wants to be positive, so it is attractive to the positive, and they sort of nest together, making the two fields combine neutral. Imagine pouring water from full pitcher, positive amount of water, into an empty pitcher, negative amount of water, until they both contain the same amount of water, in agreement, neutral. This same effect happens during storms. There is a gap between two electric fields containing regions of positive and negative charge. When a region of positive charge in a cloud hovers over a region of negative charge on land, a string of energy passes between them called lightning. But why is there a space between the land and the cloud, even though the cloud is very much heavier than the air beneath it? If this weren't true, then clouds would simply fly off into space. Likewise, rain would not fall down but up if it were not heavier than the air beneath it. This separation is caused by magnetic fields. The land, mantle, and crust of the Earth creates an outward magnetic field that pushes towards space. The more water the cloud holds, the heavier it becomes, and gravity, mass, push it downward. The cloud can never become heavy enough to reach the surface of a landmass, not even when it is full of ice. When the landmass and the clouds become equal, like our two pitchers of water, Then you won't see an exchange of energy in the form of lightning. This will allow precipitation to fall. When sufficient amounts of energy is exchanged from the land to the cloud or from the cloud to the land, then a temporary equilibrium is established, and the cloud begins to descend in the form of varying degrees of precipitation, i.e., fog, mist, dew, light, and heavy drops of rain. There are other factors that create tornadoes, sleet, hail, snow, etc., which I won't get into here. The moon, though, has an incredible role to play, as well as the sun. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Genesis 2:5-6. It is common knowledge that the moon affects high and low tide, but how and why? The moon is a giant magnet that pushes on the water. The water is diamagnetic, meaning it repels. Actually, the sea isn't level. You hear the term sea level used quite often, but it isn't level at all. As you move farther out into the ocean, away from the continents, the sea level actually rises higher and higher, like a great mound, which is connected to the shoreline. The reason for this is because the magnetic field of the ocean floor, land, is pushing up, and the magnetic fields of the continents, more land, are pushing outward towards the middle of the ocean. This causes the water to be pushed away from the continents, while the floor of the ocean pushes upward, creating a huge mound of water. The moon, a huge, powerful magnet, pushes the water downward and away from itself as it revolves around the earth. This is what causes high tide and low tide. We have always been taught that the sun's heat evaporates the water into the air and the colder atmosphere cools it to become clouds. But I believe this has been misinterpreted. Otherwise, the higher up in the atmosphere, the closer you would be to the sun, and therefore it should be hotter. But we know that is not true. Likewise, during the winter months, the Earth is actually closest to the sun, so the effects described above should be intensified, but it is actually cloudier during the winter months than in the summer. This is further proof that magnetic fields and electric current pushing the surface of the water away, forcing molecules of water into the atmosphere, is the true cause of the hydrological cycle, and not the sun. A simple experiment to demonstrate these effects can be done with a petri dish filled with about 1/4 inch of water, and place a strong NIB magnet under it, and you will see the water push out from the center and up the sides of the dish. In essence, what is going on is that vapor, a mist or molecules of water, are being pushed away, evaporated from the magnetic earth, raining upside down. Think of this like a boiling water pot on the stove, except the energy supplied isn't heat, but a magnetic field. The vapor ascends outward and it disappears into the space of the house. The house is the universe, and the pot and stove are the earth. So, what keeps the vapor from floating off into space? Every planet is orbiting in a bubble called a heliosphere. The heliosphere is the magnetic field of the sun, and it extends beyond Pluto. This means that as we orbit around the sun through this heliosphere, there is a magnetic field pressing downward on the Earth. This is what keeps us from floating away, and explains why the sun had to be created on day 4 before life forms that weren't tied to the crust could be created. It is the interaction of these two fields that press the vapor into clouds and trap them in a certain area above the Earth. So how do clouds become electrified? Well, since we know that the moon is pressing the tide ahead of its orbital path, isn't it also likely that it is pressing the clouds ahead also? Likewise, we know that a moving magnet can create an electric current, but where does the current created by the moon's rotation go? The clouds are the conduit, or more precisely, envelop the electrical conductivity of the air, electricity, that is always present in our atmosphere. A conduit is a pipe or channel for conveying fluids such as water, or also a tube or duct for enclosing electrical wires or cable. The Earth's flexible, dynamic, torus-shaped plasmasphere and radiation belt create the perfect conduit to flow energy around the Earth. This is the explanation for what Hutchison sees in his experiments and explains the phenomena experienced all over the world, the most famous place being the Bermuda Triangle. Look back at the two diagrams of the hotspots on the Earth and the two bands around the Sun. Those bands are the places of greatest solar activity, notice on the world map. Those are also the bands of greatest unexplained phenomena. Add to this the position of the Moon during its revolution around the Earth and the angle at which the Earth tilts on its axis, and you get a triangle of three interacting magnetic fields playing with the electrical field always present in the sky. This creates a vortex of energies at those 12 hot spots and other places around the Earth less frequently. If one of the Hutchison effects at where these fields interplay is the lateral separation of various solid metal bars, then perhaps this is what ultimately triggers the lateral separation of the Earth's crust, in other words, earthquakes. So how is it possible that in the beginning there was no rain, only mist, and why are hurricanes, storms, and earthquakes getting stronger, and forest fires, Hutchison effect of spontaneous combustion, becoming more frequent? Are these related? Yes. Remember, the reason trees and grass were created was for the purpose of receiving and storing and transmitting all the electrical energy from the air into the crust. In the beginning, there was an equilibrium between land and sky, wherein the vegetation was the transmitter of these energies, and most of the water of the Earth was contained in deep caverns under the upper crust. See Hydroplate Theory, from the book In the Beginning, 7th edition, Dr. Walt Brown. Hence, there would have been a constant mist all the time that would have filled the lower atmosphere. A constant dense envelope of water, similar to being in the middle of a cloud all the time. A magnetic event created a hysteresis, Mariana Trench equals hysteresis loop, of the Earth that created all continents, comets, asteroids, dimples on Moon and Mars, etc., the Ice Age, and other solar system phenomena. See theory as an example, which I cannot get into here. But as we continue massive deforestation, destroying the transmittance and storage capacity of the Earth for the massive amounts of energy it is constantly receiving, we will see more and more destructive forces from Mother Earth. The Hutchison effect anomalies are becoming standard events all over the world. These were rare occurrences up until the time of the Industrial Revolution, but since are becoming more and more frequent. The fires of California are only a small example of what is possible if we do not change the way we are raping the planet of oil, coal, and timber. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts and saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation." For this they willfully forget, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. 2 Peter 3:3-9. The scoffers are politicians, presidents, big business, and educational systems. The lust of money is the root of all evil, and they walk after their lust, not caring about the destruction of the life of the planet and its inhabitants. Their reasoning is that there is no end. Everything is just survival of the fittest, or to them the richest. To them there is no coming Christ. Actually, he wasn't even real. There is no God. Evolution says, this is the way it always has been and always will be. This is their logic. Who cares as long as I get rich? For the reason of money and power, they remain willingly ignorant of creation and its perfection. Therefore, the end result will be superstorms, super earthquakes, massive fires, because it will be the manifestations of their ignorant actions and indiscretions. It is because of the long-suffering love of God for the world that we are allowed to continue in our dissonance, so that we can repent and change. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Why is all that information so important to creation, about clouds and weather and mist and Hutchison effects? Because after we take one more step and examine a phenomenon called ball lightning, we will be able to create the sun. I am proposing that clouds become manifest around high concentrations of electrical conductivity in the air. This is also seen in the Bermuda Triangle when machines, full of electrical equipment, become enveloped by a mysterious cloud-like substance. Further, clouds are full of alternating current, a moving AC current, which we know generates its own magnetic field. Therefore, between the clouds and the Earth, that space is another fluctuating magnetic field. As energy becomes trapped in this magnetic field in the form of lightning, it can create a phenomenon called ball lightning. But before we can understand ball lightning and eventually the sun, we must gain a new and better understanding of the composition of lightning itself. It has been accepted that lightning is a form of plasma. Other examples of plasma include neon and fluorescent lights, the sun and solar wind, stars and interstellar medium. But what I am about to show is that lightning and the sun and stars are not plasma bodies per se, but the interstellar medium and the solar wind and the lights we see emitted from them are plasma. Plasma is the fourth state of matter, solid, liquid, gas, plasma, that is electrically conductive, being an ionized gas, and so couples strongly with magnetic fields. A typical plasma configuration is a fiber through which an electric current can circulate, or in other words, gets pinched. The axial current through a fiber, on a line, generates an orbital angular magnetic field. This field increases the pinch due to gradient magnetic pressure, P m equals B 2 U. The gradient of material pressure acts against the magnetic field which the compression. This is exactly what clouds are. They are plasma, a fiber through which the electrical conductivity of the air gets distorted, in some cases pinched. The magnetic field compression comes from the sun, the moon, and the earth. And the material pressure from the cloud formation acts against these forces. Excitation of plasma requires partial ionization of neutral atoms, molecules of a medium. To be able to conduct electricity across a spontaneously ionized gaseous medium, an electric field would need a field strength of at least 2,500 kV m energy for ionizing collisions, according to a theory by Alex Gurevich of the Lebedev Physical Institute in 1992, may come from cosmic rays, radiation consisting of particles emitted by the stars in the firmament. Cosmic rays strike air molecules and release extremely energetic electrons which are accelerated and strike other electrons, causing a chain reaction of long trajectory electrons and creating conductive plasma. This is called a runaway breakdown effect. If at least as many charge carriers are recreated per unit time as recombine, the plasma can be sustained. In an electric arc, the electrons and cations of ionized gas act as charge carriers. Actually, we know that air is constantly conducting electricity. We also know that our air, atmosphere, is constantly being bombarded by cosmic rays. This means that there is a constant form of lightning around us everywhere all the time, if lightning is plasma, but it's not. What you see flashing in the sky during a storm is lightning. What you breathe, walk, move, exist in, all the time, is an ionized gas field, a plasma, called a plasmasphere. In xerography, the electrostatic charges are uniformly distributed over the surface of a drum. God created this drum, the earth, over which he planned to, and accomplished, evenly distributed electrostatic charges as the paper upon which he would create the object representation of his linguistic sound. In other words, all animate life is a letter, word, sentence, paragraph, or thesis, a graphical representation of the sound of the word. This is the purpose of the stars in the firmament, to give light upon the earth, so that there would be an indeterminate amount of diversity, as every time a life form is born, into this reality it would take on different characteristics. And since it was his word that created the stars in the firmament, and he set them in place, every life form in this earth is born to be a representation of him. Only man can mess this up. Further, this means that we are born for a purpose, and you have a reason to be here for more than dying. The stars are the ink on the paper, as each of their different chemistry would influence the color, shape, and psychology of their carbon copies. You thought photocopiers, faxes, and scanners were created by man. We do the same with our language. We write the words we say on paper, which is why you are able to read this hypothesis. God created, invented it first. Electrostatic discharge is an electric current driven by an excess of electric charge. A gas discharge is an electrical discharge through an ionized gas. The character of the discharge critically depends on the amplitude, frequency, or phase of the wave to vary in accordance with the current. The frequency of the excited plasma field, the clouds, determines the power of the electrical discharge and depends on the shape and position of the plasma resonance. The bunching of lighter ions parallel to the magnetic field, while heavier ions move in a direction perpendicular to the field. Isn't it strange coincidence that we used all the same vocabulary in Chapter 1 to describe the physics of sound in relationship to God's voice and all of creation? So how is it that we see clouds of plasma within an already electrically conductive plasmasphere enveloping the whole Earth? We see clouds of plasma as different from the ambient plasma surrounding us all the time because of negative glow. Electrons that have been accelerated to high speeds produce ionization, and slower electrons that have inelastic collisions produce excitations. Slower electrons are responsible for the negative glow. As electrons slow down, energy for excitations are no longer available, and Faraday dark space begins, which is a spot where the net space charge is very low and the axial electric field is small because of recombination and diffusion. Recombination and diffusion are why clouds sort of disappear back into the ambient plasma of the plasmasphere. When these ions follow magnetic field lines, they create what's known as Birkeland currents. These currents generally refer to any electrical current in a space plasma, an ionized gas, electric field, but more specifically when charged particles follow magnetic field lines. These currents are caused by the movement of the clouds perpendicular to the magnetic field of the Earth. These currents are essentially hollow beams of electrons in the form of a circle of vortices. The clouds are just giant Birkeland currents that create a circular magnetic field around them. If the current is flowing east to west or vice versa, then the magnetic field will be rotating angularly north to south, clockwise or counterclockwise, and as this front moves perpendicular to the field lines of the Earth, and these lines push on each other, they can create fissures or cracks in the atmosphere between the surface of Earth and the base of the clouds. Remember, the atmosphere is a good electrical insulator, so the less insulation it has to burn through to distribute excess charge, the easier it is to strike. Or in this case, these fissures represent lines of no resistance. These cracks and fissures created by a horizontally moving electric field and a laterally rotating magnetic field perpendicular to the Earth is what has been hypothesized by Heinz Casimir as a leader system that carries a net zero charge. What I am proposing is that these leaders are black bodies similar to Birkeland currents. These black body currents absorb all electromagnetic radiation that falls into these fissures. The light that we see is black body radiation. This radiation is created by the photoelectric effect, which is the emission of electrons from matter upon the absorption of electromagnetic radiation. The more radiation absorbed, the greater the photoelectric effect will be. There are many equations governing the properties of black bodies: Stefan Boltzmann law, Planck's law of black body radiation, Wien's displacement law. If the heat produced is below 700 Kelvin, then the body appears black. If it is above 700 Kelvin, then the body will radiate visible light in wavelengths of various colors. In photoelectric emission, the electron gains the kinetic energy to escape from photons. The minimum energy needed to remove a photoelectron from its cyclotron motion an infinite distance away is called photoelectric work function. Remember, heavier ions flow perpendicular to the magnetic field, axial direction, while the lighter ions bunch together parallel to the orbital angular magnetic field. These lighter ions will then gain cyclotron resonance and frequency. Perhaps this is why the negative glow of clouds appears light and fluffy, similar to cotton balls. Cyclotron resonance and frequency happens when charged particles, lighter ions, in a magnetic field resonate with an electric field perpendicular to the magnetic field that oscillates a certain number of times per second that the ions orbit the magnetic field line. This means that as these lighter ions rotate along the magnetic field lines that are orbiting the axial flow of the heavier electrons, they are rotating orbitally in a sine wave fashion. This effect creates a vacuum arc in space. This will create heat from high-speed particle collisions, in turn freeing more particles and continuing the arc. Recently, it has been revealed that most lightning emits intense bursts of X-ray and gamma rays, which seem to be produced during the stepped leader and dart leader phases, just before the stroke becomes visible. This fissure creates a whooshing inward, much like opening a door quickly. As everything rushes in at the same time, nearly, it is thrust outward. As photoelectrons are pressed outward against the surrounding plasmasphere, attempting to press in, this creates a locale of greatest energy. Although the fissure is two-dimensional, created by laterally moving magnetic field lines, the photoelectric effect will appear three-dimensionally, or spherical, hence the hollow beam of electrons in a circle, 2D of vortices, that appear to be streaking across the sky. Lightning, then, is a black body current that emits radiation via the photoelectric effect. Actually, the heat produced from this black body radiation is several times hotter than the sun. This is what is happening during some of the corona manifestations of Hutchison effects, when one of the colors emitted was pink. There have been many eyewitness reports of ball lightning. Some fireballs have been reported up to 100 meters in diameter. When the stepped leader forms at the positively charged cloud tops, with the consequence that a negatively charged streamer issues from the ground. Positive lightning bolts are typically 6 to 10 times more powerful than negative bolts, last 10 times longer, and generate huge quantities of ELF and VLF radio waves. An average bolt can carry a current of 300 kiloamperes, transfer a charge of 300 coulombs, has a potential difference of 1 gigavolt, 1,000 million volts, and dissipates enough energy to light a 100-watt light bulb for 95 years. An average bolt of negative lightning carries a current of 30 kiloamperes, transfers a charge of 5 coulombs, has a potential difference of about 100 megavolts, and dissipates 500 megajoules, enough to light a 100-watt light bulb for 2 months. Another interesting phenomenon is called ball lightning. Tesla was the first to succeed in producing artificial ball lightning in a laboratory. There have been many eyewitness reports of ball lightning. Some fireballs have been reported up to 100 meters in diameter. They are described as a globular zone with a long twisting rope-like projection. They have also been seen in tornadoes. Recently, a man named Dr. Kirill Chukhanov has not only reproduced ball lightning several times in a laboratory, but can also tap this energy and put it to good use. Dr. Chukhanov describes ball lightning as a two-dimensional macro-quantum unit. Further, he states that ball lightning is not plasma. The quantum-free energy obtained from his quantum unit is not a bond energy, chemical or nuclear, and is the result of a violation of the law of conservation of energy within particular quantum conditions. Find it hard to believe? Well, you can try the laboratory experiments for yourself and see the results. Here is more of what his research proves about ball lightning. If an electrical current is applied to the ball lightning, 2 electrodes touching the surface of the ball lightning electron shelf, then the path of this current cannot go directly through the ball lightning quantum nucleus, the shortest distance between 2 electrodes. The ball lightning nucleus is impenetrable not only for macro-material objects, but also for an electrical current. In this case, the only possible path of the applied electrical current is around the ball lightning nucleus in the zone of the ball lightning electron shelf. The free energy radiation continues 15 to 20 seconds after the excitement factor is turned off. This effect is impossible for regular plasma and for the case of preservation of the law of energy conservation. The explanation of this effect is as follows. After stopping, turn off, the excitement factor, the quantum electrons continue to rotate for some period of time, 15 to 20 seconds around the ball-lightning nucleus in radiating free quantum energy. This important fact can be used for creating very efficient technologies of producing free quantum energy. Ball lightning can be created in air, media. Ball lightning does not appear in hydrogen, helium, or water vapor on a small scale. Quantum-free energy is only produced in the ball-lightning electron cloud, shelf. In the zone of ball-lightning electron shelf, quantum electrons are continuously transferring free quantum energy to all particles located in this zone. The more quantum particles in this zone of transfer, the more the amount of transferred free quantum energy. Obviously, the pressure of the working gas, air for example, plays a crucial role for the efficiency of the QE process. For equal input power, we can expect hundreds of times more QE output power in very condensed gas media by contrast with gas under atmospheric pressure. Ball lightning, a quantum macro object, represents a QE spherical electrical capacitor. As known from electrodynamics, every charged electrical capacitor is a source of electrical energy, a kind of electrical battery. The only difference between a regular capacitor and a quantum capacitor is that the first one possesses a limited supply of electrical energy, whereas the quantum capacitor possesses an unlimited, inexhaustible supply of quantum electric energy. Therefore, ball lightning can be used as an inexhaustible source of quantum electricity. This is a condensed summary of the step-by-step formation of a black-body lightning current as I described earlier. We do not see the black body without scientific equipment, but we see its radiation, its electron shelf. The core of the lightning strike is impenetrable, while the electrons actually rotate radially in a shelf down or up the strike. The interacting magnetic fields create these fissures that open and close nearly instantly. But just like in Chukhanov's experiments, leave an imprint for electrons to follow, giving the lightning a duration and sometimes a flicker effect. It is these same processes by which God created the sun and the stars in the firmament. Actually then, black holes are nothing more than a quantum macro unit with a heat produced of less than 700 Kelvin. Stars likewise have black hole cores and emit heat greater than 700 Kelvin that radiate differently colored visible wavelengths. When a sufficiently massive star runs out of fuel, it is unable to support itself against its own gravitational pull, and it should supposedly collapse into a black hole. What I am suggesting is that the black hole is always there to begin with. The reason nothing can escape its so-called gravitational pull, including light, is because this two-dimensional macro-quantum object is a fissure that was created by interacting magnetic fields in the first place. Not only has Chukhanov created a miniature sun in his laboratory experiments, he has created miniature black bodies, or black holes. Since the universe is 90% hydrogen, then when these stars emit various wavelengths, this becomes the energy to charge the atmosphere of the gas-filled universe, creating an everywhere-at-once ionized gas field, a plasma. Funny, this is how I explained our own atmosphere. If astrophysicists were to understand and research ball lightning as Chukhanov has, many of the mysteries of space would be unraveled. As a matter of fact, our atmosphere is just a smaller version of the heliosphere, plasma atmosphere of the Sun, surrounding all planets in the solar system, which is just a small version of the atmosphere of the whole universe. This is influenced by the power of multiple suns set in the firmament. See Day 2 of Creation to remember magnetic construction. If what I am saying is true, then we should see clouds in the universe as well as storm systems. Guess what we do? The same phenomena we see in our own atmosphere can be observed in space. Isn't this what the solar wind is? We are actually, and all the planets likewise, moving through a giant cloud that surrounds our solar system. Just like a plane flying through cloud formations here in Earth's atmosphere, whose electrical instruments go haywire sometimes. So also, does the Earth when bursts of energy from the Sun, and indeed from other stars, pass through the cloud of the solar system, to disrupt artificial electric processes here on the Earth plane that we are all passengers of. Magnetic fields can be detected everywhere, in and near planets, between stars, and throughout galaxies. The associated electrical currents and 1 × B forces must be inferred with much uncertainty. Given that uncertainty, theory has emphasized rather simple concepts that are equivalent to mechanics and gas dynamics. Magnetic energy can do work like any other reservoir of energy. Magnetic pressure acts much like gas pressure, and magnetic tension acts like the tension on a violin string. Moreover, the concept of magnetic induction can be used to visualize magnetic fields and to convert the magnetic fields from a mathematical construct to what is practically a physical quantity. Thus, the topic of magnetic fields can be used in physics courses as an example of energies, pressures, waves, and Faraday's law of induction. On Earth, power is generated by fuels, water, wind, and solar power and generators. Always, the location of the supply is not the location of the power usage or dissipation. As an example, the power that lights up Los Angeles is located 1,300 km away in the Pacific Northwest via DC transmission lines. In optical and infrared emission, only the load region, Los Angeles, is visible from the light and heat it dissipates in power usage. The transmission line is invisible. This situation is also true in space. Kirchhoff's circuit laws were suddenly catapulted to dimensions 8 orders of magnitude larger than that previously investigated in the laboratory. There is a tendency for charged particles to follow magnetic field lines of force, and this forms the transmission lines in space. An electrical discharge is a sudden release of electric or magnetic stored energy. This generally occurs when the electromagnetic stress exceeds some threshold for breakdown that is usually determined by small-scale properties of the energy transmission medium. As such, discharges are local phenomena and are usually accompanied by violent processes such as rapid heating, ionization, the creation of pinched filamentary conduction channels, particle acceleration, and the generation of prodigious amounts of electromagnetic radiation. Regardless of scale, the motion of charged particles produces a self-magnetic field that can act on other collections of particles or plasmas, internally or externally. If it is true that the location of the supply of energy is not the location of the power usage, as described in the above Los Angeles example, and only the load region is visible because of the light and heat it dissipates from power usage, then this means that the singularity that was the beginning of the Big Bang was merely a load region of energy, a location of power usage or dissipation, meaning the power supply was coming from somewhere else that was invisible. Likewise, if the Big Bang released all of its energy outward in all directions into nothingness, how did the first star form when the nothingness would have had to be filled first before any combinations or slowing down could occur? Likewise, if new stars and planets are being formed all the time over billions of years, then where do these new formations get their energy from, since like the Big Bang they are only load regions of energy dissipation? There must be an invisible energy source, not only initially, before the Big Bang, separate from the Big Bang singularity load region, but also an eternally available energy source for the popping out of all matter in the universe and all life-form institution here on Earth. That invisible energy source is described in the beginning of this paper, on day 1 of creation. That source of energy is God. As a matter of fact, the ZPE energy is a magnetic field energy, which is the Holy Ghost or life force of God, and it is these magnetic field lines of force that charged particles follow, and this forms the transmission lines in space. Now, in order for this postulation to be true according to the Penrose tiling effect of all creation, not only has to be true in space, but would have to be true in the very small as well, say, cellular structure of living organisms. Indeed, this is the case. The cell of living organism is no different than the cell of the whole universe. Birkeland currents are the central nervous system of outer space, you and cells. What is the stuff of interstellar space? It can be likened to protoplasm, much like the interstitial fluid in the space between your cells and the interstitial fluid between all the molecules of every living cell. Protoplasm is composed of a skeletal framework made up of protein molecules, to which molecules of other kinds are attached, the whole suspended or dissolved in water. There is room in an average-sized cell for 64 trillion molecules of glucose, each with a molecular weight of 180, i.e., it is 180 times as heavy as hydrogen. It would take a person, counting at the rate of 1 per second, over 2 million years to count 64 trillion. The protein molecules which form the structural framework of the protoplasm are much larger than glucose molecules, averaging about 36,000 molecular weight. A cell with a volume a millionth that of the average raindrop is large enough to accommodate over 60 billion such protein molecules. It is evident, therefore, that a cell could even be much smaller than a millionth the size of a raindrop and still be abundantly able to enclose an enormous number of molecules of all sizes and sorts, and to permit a molecular organization so complex that its properties would total that of life itself. The tubes below are illustrations of low-energy pathways along which space vehicles can travel using far less fuel. The recent discovery of these pathways has made previously impossible missions feasible. Much of space travel depends on calculus, trigonometry, and vector analysis, but the existence of these routes derives from an area of mathematics called dynamical systems applied to the mutual interaction of the gravities of the Sun, nearby planets, and moons. Thus, mathematics is locating new routes for space travel and establishing connections between the atomic and the cosmic. Also, if all the energy of the Big Bang to create all the elements within the universe, including life, were in that singularity, why did it need to explode? Wouldn't it be that we are just smaller increments inside the same singularity, similar to our cell example? Isn't that what we are, and all matter is known to be today, increments of energy? Yes, yes, yes. The universe at any level is constructed similarly at any other level. There is absolutely no need for a Big Bang to begin with. If such a fantastic reality were correct, we would all have been inside it then, exactly as we are all inside of it now, regardless of its size. In such a reality, since energy can neither be created nor destroyed, then the embodiments of that energy would remain eternally the same. Yet, stars die. This requires a new type of energy, because death energy then is not the same as life energy. But wouldn't we be back to the creationist, dualistic worldview? God is life energy, and Lucifer is death energy. These are two opposing and opposite energies. The spiritual is eternal, while the carnal is mortal. Therefore, since things die, there was no Big Bang. As opposed to Chukhanov's laboratory experiments, ball lightning could be produced inside hydrogen and helium at proper frequency and pressure. Therefore, just like the formation of ball lightning, within certain conditions in the atmosphere of Earth, giant ball lightning is likewise created in the atmosphere of space. With respect to our Sun, the power transmitted across invisible power lines comes from the frequency emissions of the stars that are set in the firmament. Our Sun is not just some other star. How special is our Sun? Those stars, the exact number of them, had to be set in place to create the perfect current for the creation of the perfect Sun that would radiate a perfect amount of heat and radiation for a planet of perfect dimension, a perfect distance away to receive that energy through the perfect transmission, receivers and holders, vegetation, so that his ultimate engineering feat could be created in the next 3 days, sentient life forms. Our Sun is a giant two-dimensional macro quantum unit that can be reproduced and harnessed safely in a laboratory, observed all around us in nature in the form of ball lightning, and can provide unending pollution-free energy for the whole world. Yeah, that sounds like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit to me. By the way, this solves the coronal heating problem. It is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. Dr. Carl Sagan,